So, all right, I'm going to do a little intro, and then we'll just start talking about Graham Greene. And I'll say a few things, and you talk about him as an author that you've just discovered.
Okay, you just, whatever, just cue.
Okay. Welcome to Catholic Writers Every Catholic Should Read. Today's writer is Graham Greene. He was recognized as one of the greatest fiction writers of the 20th century, a candidate for a Nobel Prize. Some say he was denied the Nobel Prize because he was a Catholic, and wrote one of the greatest novels of the 20th century. And Sister Julia has actually just discovered Graham Greene as an author. So I think it's going to be very interesting to hear what she has to say as we delve into one of the Catholic writers I think every Catholic should read. So, Sister Julia, you have just been introduced to what is considered Graham Greene's masterpiece, his 1938 book, The Power and the Glory. 1940 it was published. He went to Mexico in 1938. It was officially he went to Mexico as a kind of reporter and with a promise that he was going to write a travel guide for
He got more than he bargained for.
Well, he did write a travel guide. The American title of it was called The Lawless Roads. And the English title was Another Mexico. So that came out. It was a travel guide to Mexico. But he spent a lot of time in, I think, Chiapas and Tabasco, where even though the overt persecution of the church that had seen the martyrdom of, like, Blessed Miguel Pro, that had kind of diminished a bit. But in these two states in Mexico, what he was witnessing was the Catholic Church was still in the catacombs. There were no churches that were allowed to function. No priests were allowed to be present in these states. And he, as a Catholic, was seeing this firsthand. And so he gets back from his assignment in Mexico as an Englishman, just there observing things, an English writer, journalist. He gets back to England and in less than 2 years comes out with a masterpiece. And I just want to know, you discovering Graham Greene as a writer, first of all, what were your impressions?
Well, it was a hard sell for me because I just didn't seem to be too interested. However, it's one of those things where, okay, it's a classic, and
every Catholic should read.
Exactly. So I said, all right, I'll pick it up. The first one I picked up, I didn't like the binding. So one of the sisters actually got me.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. So, but they actually got me a new copy of Power and the Power and the Glory so that I would enjoy reading it. All right. So I'm into the first chapter, and I'm thinking, what is this about? You know, it took me a bit to get into it. And it is the kind of book that actually you get sucked into.
So we're following a nameless priest. We never
you never discover who the priest is. Never. But you know him. It's like you really, really know this guy. It's hard to describe. You know, I'm thinking this is not my normal pick for a book. You know, it's not. It isn't. But after the first, into the second and third chapter, I'm like, wow, this guy really knows how to write. I mean, I was my knowledge of Graham Greene was like thimble size, and actually was just based on watching the movie, The End of the Affair. But I should never judge a book by the movie. Never.
And never judge an author by the movies.
No, because it was okay. It was okay, but I don't know. I wouldn't have been inclined to read the book having seen the movie. Usually it's vice versa. You read the book and then, okay, you'll give the movie a go. But that's as much as of Graham. And I didn't even know it was Graham Greene. It was somebody said to me, "Have you read any Graham Greene?" I said, "I haven't. No, I don't think so. No. Power and the Glory. No." And then they went through the whole list, and they got to the End of the Affair. I said, "He wrote that." I said, "You know, I didn't really feel inclined to pick up the book, but this instead, I'm telling you." I said, "What most authors can do, like in character development. Say, for instance, you got this. Even if it's a good author, even if it's a good author, they take like chapters to develop a character, and Graham Greene can do it in 3 paragraphs. I'm not kidding. In 3 paragraphs, he can he's got these characters, and it's not like you've got the main character, but then you have all these other characters in subplots going on, but they are so alive and so colorful that they remain in your head afterwards. It's like, well, what happened to Coral, and what happened to this person? And they weren't like essential characters, but they were so vibrant. I said, this guy can really write. He can really write. So,
and even the way he reflects the situation in Mexico was so realistic, that
so current too. I was reading this thinking to myself, this is the kind of book that even if you've already read it, you should read it again. And if you haven't read it, you should pick it up. It's like 200 pages. It's not that big of an investment of your time, but I mean, really, it's almost as though what he is saying speaks to our current situations. It's just because it's there's nothing new under the sun. I think we've said that before so many times. It's like no matter what the new heresy of the moment or the new revolution, it's all been done before. And so you're reading this, and this is like dated. This is during the Mexican Revolution, right? But you would swear it's something that's happened currently. And there's one point in the book where he arrives at one of his old parishes, and he's traveling with this guy who's like a Judas character. He's absolutely going to betray him.
He is going to betray him. Yeah.
He is going to betray him. But he's a priest, albeit reluctantly. I mean, it's like he's got this constant struggle going on. The poor guy, you feel for him. But they arrive on the outskirts of one of the parishes where he thinks he can find refuge. And nobody wants to give him refuge because they're terrified. And on the outskirts is the cemetery. And the cemetery is like defaced and broken tombstones, and the Blessed Mother, the way he describes her is like a Venus without the arms. She has no arms, and an angel without wings. And he reflects on what is this need to deface
these statues.
Mm-hmm. And his reflection is that it's man trying to destroy God in a sense, but the thing is that man is the image of God. So they're attacking the image of God, and after that they'll go after the actual person. They'll start with the images, and then they go on. They say I can't do it verbatim. If I had the book here, I would say, but he was reflecting like, well, if God were a toad, they could just rid the world of toads, but because man is made in the image of God, that's where they start. That's where they attack. And I said, my one regret in reading this book is that I didn't read it with a highlighter. By the way, should read it with a highlighter, because it's one of those things that has constant great quotes, and it's like I really need to share this with somebody. Where was it? I can't remember where it was in the book. So I have a feeling I have to reread it.
And you have a good copy, so.
I have a good copy.
I only have an old paperback that I checked out of our community library.
It's absolutely worth reading. But like I said, not my typical book that I'd pick up.
Now, the funny thing about Graham Greene is he was a convert to the faith, but he wasn't really like, oh, I have discovered the Catholic faith and I believe in it and I'm going to become a Catholic. He became a Catholic because his fiancée was Catholic. She was a convert of the kind of the true kind, I discovered the faith and nothing's going to stop me. But he was like, I discovered a girl.
That's how it happens sometimes.
Yes, and something along the process of his instructions, it all clicked for him. Mm-hmm. And his marriage was not a happy marriage. He had about 10 years where he lived in a beautiful sacramental life with his wife. And for the rest of his life, he went from woman to woman. I never divorced. Wouldn't do that. But he was a serial adulterer. But he could never break with Catholicism. Mm. There was a degree of conviction there that he said, I don't believe my disbelief when it came to aspects of the faith. So, but he resented when people called him a Catholic writer or a Catholic novelist. And he would say, there's no such thing as a Catholic novel. He said, there are novels with Catholic themes. And I remember, Sister Julia, you responded, every good novel is a Catholic novel.
Absolutely. I said, any good novel that treats about humanity in a true sense, is Catholic. They're absolutely. I read that and I said, that is a really
I
good
beg to
Catholic
differ,
novel.
right?
I really, yeah. I mean, he's looking at it from his perspective, but from my
Right.
perspective, it's like if they're true to if he's talking about human nature and the redemption and the fall and sin and
Which he
conversion.
almost always does.
Yeah, I said
in his serious novels.
exactly. He's not putting a different face on it. He's actually speaking the truth of human nature and the fall and redemption. And anybody who's able to do that in a novel is,
It's a Catholic
writing a
novel.
Catholic novel. I'm sorry, they're writing Catholic because they're speaking the truth. So.
And pretty much when you stack up the serious novels or the great novels of Graham Greene, we can put it that way, because he wrote what he called entertainments. He wrote spy novels. He wrote travel novels. He wrote delightful, funny. I mean, he was funny. Even some of his really serious novels, there are parts where you just laugh. But his great novels are really in-depth Catholic novels, because he cannot get away from his Catholic vision of the human person and of grappling with the big issues of relationships and sin and what does it mean to be the image of God and to deal with other human beings who are the image of God, and what does it mean when the innocent are exploited or abused. I mean, he treats with these things. And you look at the end of The Affair, and the introduction to, or an essay I read on the end of The Affair, and someone thought, well, all this Catholic stuff that was in that book, that was just, gilding the lily. It was just little excesses that Graham Greene put in there because he was a Catholic. It's like, no, you don't get the connections because you're not a Catholic. But actually, those are pivotal aspects in the story. And I haven't seen the films, but there were 2 films based on that novel. Graham Greene wrote, I think it was at least 16 of his writings. He either wrote the screenplay or his books were turned into films. So A Gun for Hire, I think he wrote the screenplay for that, or it was based on a story he wrote. He was very much involved in the world of film. He was a film critic. He worked with directors. He critiques plays. So he had a very visual imagination as well. That comes across in his writing.
It's very visual. There's parts of that book that actually you could smell it. I mean,
Yes.
it's like it's just so descriptive. And I was, after reading the book, I'm really glad I read the book first. I have a feeling if I ever saw a movie interpretation of it, it wouldn't come
How could it?
close to it, because the thing is, most of the book is in the guy's head. It's like his own self-reflection, and I know that might sound boring. I mean, to me, before I read the book, it's like, really, I don't know if I want to read this, but it's totally just draws you so much into it, and I found myself really sympathetic to this poor schlep of a priest. I mean, he had so many struggles. And then I said, you know what? It's so reflective of maybe why I'm sympathetic is because it's so reflective of our own situation, how we find ourselves. We so seldom live up to our own expectations, our own ideals of what sanctity looks like or what holiness looks like.
And how he looked at this priest, for all external aspects of failure, except that he's going ahead through,
no matter
walking
what,
through the catacombs of Mexico, you could say, still bringing the sacraments to people in his failure as a person. And he's looking back at his early years of priesthood, where everything was roses
fine.
And success, and
everybody was kissing his hand.
Yes.
Everybody was giving him signs of respect, and here he was like the dregs. I mean, he was an outcast.
He's pursued, and he's a failure, and he's basically an alcoholic, and yet, where is the grace most at work?
Actually, the last. I should just go back and read the last 2-3 chapters, because when you have a good book, I tend to gobble. I don't know about the rest of you, not like a turkey, but I mean just devour. I just devour a book, and I was just reading voraciously towards the end. I had to get to the end. Because I kept telling her, wait till you get to the last page, the last sentence of the last page. I know. I said, well, I was in such a hurry to get to the last sentence of the last page that I think I really missed too much. When you have a good book and you say, I think I need to backtrack and just do it again, because at the end when he realizes that he's going to die, and I said, oh, I need to really pull out the highlighter and just really that it was phenomenal. And for the subject matter and the book itself, it's like I wouldn't have believed it was that encouraging, but I think it's encouraging because in spite of our failures and how we see ourselves, God has our redemption in mind.
And to me, that's Graham Greene,
incredible.
The Catholic who is aware of his failures and his sin, which were very apparent. Now, we have to also look at Graham Greene as someone who struggled with mental illness. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so someone who was constantly, you could say, at war with himself as well. Not just with, we could say, the big sins that are out there. He struggled with suicidal thoughts as a young person. Played Russian roulette, the real kind, as a teenager. He found a gun in the house. So there's someone who personally grappled with sin, kind of the big ones in a very personal way. So that's coming out. He's working this stuff out on the page for us.
Yeah.
And it's coming out. And it's almost like he's giving us this, almost to me, it's a priestly service. It's like he's offering this on the page. He does this in The Heart of the Matter as well, which is set in, you could say, British colonial Africa. He never tells us what country it's in. And it involves a Catholic adulterer and suicide. And again, intimate looks. But the main character there's a beautiful prayer at this one point where he's trying, he's got his wife on the one hand, who is a very neurotic person, you could say, who is impossible to please, and then the woman he's having the affair with, who is a widow 20 years younger than he, whom he sees with great pity. So he feels like they're in a sense these two women that he pities, and so he feels torn by his compassion for both of these women, and so it's an unusual look at adultery, and he says, "Oh God, I have deserted you. Do not you desert me." And what a prayer from the heart. It's like of a person who feels trapped in their sin and in their situation. And in the end of the affair, where the narrator Bendrix, who is trying to figure out why his lover called off their affair in the middle of what seemed like pure bliss for both of them, during the World War II, and she dies, and he never got a clear answer from her. Why did she stop this? And he finds in her diary a little thought, and she was going through a spiritual thing, and she writes in her diary, "When God looks at me, does he see something I can't see? It must be lovely if he is able to love it." So you get these gems in
That's what I said.
Graham Greene's writing, and he's saying there's no such thing as a Catholic novel. It's like, you don't find stuff like that.
No, it's full of it. It's full of it. That's why I said if you read it with a highlighter. I mean, because you miss it otherwise, and they're too good to pass
and
up.
I have two great stories about Power and the Glory. One that is I read in the introduction to the version of the Power and the Glory that we have in our library. The introduction is by John Updike, and I don't know where he found this story, but evidently Graham Greene had gotten a letter from a woman who had given a copy of The Power and the Glory to someone who had lived through the really rough parts of the persecution in Mexico, persecution of the church. And this woman, this Mexican woman, read the book and wrote back and said, "This was such a good book. I found myself praying for the priest."
See. His characters become so real that like your sympathy goes in that direction. It's like, you're really rooting for this guy. And at the beginning of reading it, I'm thinking to myself, this guy is no Aragorn, okay? He's no heroic figure. No.
And yet he is.
And as it progressed, I said, you know what? What can I say? That most of us aren't on the level of Tolkien's Aragorn, but we can identify with the priest in this book, in Power and the Glory.
And another story about the Power and the Glory is because of that, the representation of this priest as a not heroic priest, as not up to the stature of the lives of the saints that we tell ourselves and we read out loud and we share with our children. He had fathered a child, and the child is one of the characters in the novel. And she's not okay, and he's an alcoholic, and so this is not an edifying picture of the priesthood. And so a Cardinal Pizzardo in the Vatican was quick to condemn the book. And
I didn't find that out until I finished the book, that it was on the list of
condemned books. And the Vatican wanted certain things to be taken out of the book.
Wouldn't be the book.
Yes, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. And anyway, that was part of its publication history. The Vatican really wanted some of those things excised from the book. And Graham Greene writes back, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that's a publisher's decision, it's out of my hands." Ding! And nothing really came of it. Well, Greene met Pope Paul VI at some kind of reception, and the Pope comes to him. Saint Paul VI comes to him and says, "Oh, Mr. Greene." Now, Paul VI was a polyglot, and so was Greene. And so he said, "Mr. Greene, I loved The Power and the Glory. It is one of my favorite books." And Greene says, "Oh, that's interesting, Your Holiness, because, it was condemned." and the Pope said, "Who did that?" And the Greene says, "Cardinal Pizzardo." And the Pope just went, "Pizzardo." And later, Greene said, with all the reputation that the Church of Rome has for being a dictatorial, hard-nosed, like on the level of like Soviet Russia, he said, they let this issue just die a quiet death. They didn't, he said.
They didn't come after him.
No, he said, they just like, all right, you're not going to change it, fine, So it was kind of an interesting little thing, but I thought that was hysterical. That
the fact that Paul
VI thought it was one of the best books he ever read, and so it kind of the mind with which we go to something. Paul VI was from a family of editors. His father helped found L'Osservatore Romano, so he understood literature and he understood the editorial world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's a lot to love in Graham Greene. His four, you could say great Catholic novels, they are Catholic must-reads. Brighton Rock, Power and the Glory, The End of the Affair, The Heart of the Matter. Those, they'll give you a lot to think about. They'll give you, there will be a lot that will strike your heart. We're not saying that Graham Greene is, the end-all and be-all of Catholic witnesses in his life. He did have a very close priest friend that every summer for the last 20 years of his life he went on vacations with this Spanish priest. And his children knew that when the hour of his death was coming, they had to call that priest wherever he was in the world and get him to be by Greene's side, and he was.
Wow.
So he died with the sacraments. He made sure that he would have the sacraments. He wanted to die a Catholic. The doctor that attended him said, "I have never seen a man die with such peace." Said that the doctor testified to the man's faith. So it was a faith that was tortured in a sense, and so it's not an easy faith.
It isn't, but it's also a faith that most people nowadays can identify with, too. Not all of us have an easy faith.
Yeah,
you know,
and this is not a time for an easy faith.
No,
and so
you
I think
you have to work through it, and I think that's another thing about the book that I mean, this is like what 1930s Mexico.
1938.
I found that a lot of the people I was reading about, it's like, oh, I know that person. Oh, that's my Aunt Lena, or that's my, it's like. That you can identify with the characters because they're so realistic, and I think that's another plus, and another thing in its favor is that it's something that can then be translated into your own life. It's like you can take that and that same mercy, that same hope, that same don't. God isn't giving up on you. Don't you give up? Okay, that also comes. It translates into your own life. The characters are. I think that's a mark of excellence for this author, is that he creates characters that you'd swear these people, and
they're very real.
They're very real. They're very real.
And that's what makes Graham Greene a Catholic writer every Catholic should read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.